everything is your fault. If you don't take responsibility for everything that happens to you, you're going to be right where you are 30 years from now.
He had the information. He had the warnings. The people he trusted most told him not to move, and he moved anyway, because the upside was real, and he believed he could fix what was wrong after the fact. Jerry Brazie has built and sold more than a dozen companies. He still made this call. This is a conversation about what it costs when momentum beats clarity, and what you understand about yourself when you're finally on the other side of it. This is Decision State. If we could move immediately into the acquisition, you told me a story offline. Obviously, I want to get into your backstory. Could you walk me through what you're actually running right now? What the week looks like for you? Everything's moving at once. You have two companies operating, a third you're getting off the ground. So like a day where all three are pulling on you actually look like.
I have a 38 lot subdivision that I'm working on currently, and it's over on the West Coast, which means it's a nightmare on top of a nightmare, which is any kind of development in any of those cities always is. So it eats up an inordinate amount of my time trying to get that going. We're just about at the construction phase of the development. So that the development, for people who don't know, we're going to be building the lots. I'll be building 38 lots, and then I'll build that. Once I complete that, you record those. Now I have individual lots, and then I'll build the houses on top of them and sell the houses. So that eats up a large portion of my time. I have a transportation company that I'm running in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and that eats up a portion of my time. And then I just started a new company here in the last few months, the Kronos Group, which is a peer-to-peer networking group. And literally, this thing is just off the ground. I'm just putting together the first cohorts for it, and am starting to talk about it. So I've got that as well. Over the last 30 years, I've built, bought, and sold a dozen companies, probably more than that. I've had 10,000 employees, and we're coming up on $500 million in total revenue generated out of those companies. So I'm used to being busy.
What does that look like when they're all pulling on you at once? How does your day look? How does it feel?
I'm not one of these guys that says that your day has to be scheduled, because my day is going to blow up. So I have a list of things that I'm going to want to get done in any given day. I try to get it done as soon as I can. That doesn't always happen. I don't fret about that much. And I try to knock off the things that have to get taken care of. And then, of course, whatever comes up that precedes that, let's call it an emergency, for lack of a better word, then, of course, I'll jump in and I will take care of that.
Would it be fair to say, when something goes sideways in one of them, is there a ripple effect that it brings it into the other companies?
No, not really. They're pretty sectioned off, meaning different groups handle that different thing. I'm the connection, I suppose, between all of them. So they're operating independently. I suppose a ripple effect might be that my availability may not be there as quickly as it would otherwise, and so that might slow it up, or possibly I didn't see an email or wasn't able to reply to a text or something like that. So you could make the argument that I'm the problem many times. So if I get slowed up somewhere else, it might dovetail.
Is there maybe the weight of each company, or even over your 30-year plus career, where maybe the weight of each one individually? Did you ever stop feeling that weight? Is it maybe the health aspect that you brought into it that makes you carry that weight as a baseline nowadays?
To be an entrepreneur, I think my mother said, some of the best advice I ever got, my mother said to me when I was 14 or 15 years old, that I'm the rock that everyone crashes against, and I need to get used to it. And so I kind of thought, I come from abject poverty and a very tough background. And so I never lose my perspective of where I come from. And so, I've been beaten and shot and stabbed and was living with hookers and heroin addicts when I was 17 years old. I've seen tough, I've seen rough, I've seen stress. And so I took that perspective into my working world, whether I was working for somebody or ultimately I ended up working for myself as an entrepreneur. So I think you said a word there that was really good, the baseline. I think my baseline is probably pretty high, as is most people's, if we think about it, right? If we just have some perspective. that, I'm just wiped out at the end of the day and I can't take anymore. I've never thought that one time in my entire life. I never have. Are there times that you're like, God, I'd like this problem to end, or I'd like to be out of this issue, or I wish I hadn't have done that thing and now I have to extricate myself from it and it's taking longer than I would like to, or I'm building another development and these things take forever, right? And this is getting monotonous. Yeah, certainly I do that. But never this end of the day sitting in the driveway listening to some sappy song worried about, how bad my life is. I've never thought about that one time. It is constantly attack, get knocked down, and I have been knocked down on a massive. I have made fortunes, and I have lost fortunes, and I've had fortunes taken away from me, and so I've had all of those reasons to do that. But again, at the end of the day, I go back to being stabbed in a robbery as a child and pulling a 10-inch screwdriver out of my back, thinking to myself, compared to that, and I never forget that, thinking about that as an example is just go in, put your feet down, and keep fighting. My baseline is probably pretty high compared to other people, but I think entrepreneurs generally, their baseline better be pretty high for what kind of craziness goes on around them, because that is the essence of finding success, I think, as an entrepreneur.
Running multiple things, again, past 30 years, currently, something you could say about running multiple things simultaneously that maybe you couldn't have understood until you're actually in it.
Yeah, I don't think that it is for everybody. Again, I'll say this because from the outside looking in, the thought of running multiple companies seems cool if you look at it from the outside. But when you're on the inside, it's a lot of work. Had I had any context when I started my first business at 28 years old, what I was in for over the next coming up on 30 years, I don't know that I would have done. If I knew what I was in for the next 5 years, I'd have said, you're crazy. I'm not going to do that. That's madness. When I started my first company at 28 years old, my only connection to business, to a businessman, really not, I don't even think I knew what an entrepreneur was, to a businessman was a briefcase. So I went to Staples and I bought a briefcase because every television show I had ever seen up until that point growing up, the dad came home and he was carrying a briefcase, and that's what businessmen did. That was my context for what business was. Not cash flow, not a P&L, none of those, not operations, none of those things. I had no idea how any banking, no sense for how any of that worked. Had I known that, I probably would have never done it. And so I think the knowledge of what is to come probably would dissuade a lot of people from doing it. Had I known how difficult it was going to be running 2 or 3 or 4 and at sometimes 5 companies, depending on what point in my career, certainly I don't think that was a path that I would have chosen for myself, save for the fact that it just made sense at the time. There's a lot of times I got out over my skis and I lost money trying to do things that I certainly should not have done and expanded too far. Had I kept to the core companies, I probably would not have cost myself that time and money and anguish and all of that.
You bought a company, people you trusted pushed back hard. I was wondering if we could revisit that period. What that was about, what the conversations were like, what were people telling you, and why were you and what were you saying back to them?
When you become successful, it is easy to get lost in your success. So the Kronos Group is my latest company. And like I said, it's a peer-to-peer group. Think about a mastermind group. When I was 30 years old, my first company I started, we did 4 million, 8 million, 12 million, and 14 million in the first 4 years, yearly revenue. So we were growing like gangbusters. Average ticket price was, $8 to $12. So we were growing like mad. And I got written up in the local business journal at 30 years old, and somebody came in and cold called me. It was a retired Fortune 500 CEO, and he sat down at my desk and he says, I'm putting together, in those days we called it a mastermind group. Now it's more peer-to-peer. You get together one time a month, you sit around a table or you do it digitally, and everybody gets a half an hour and you get to explain your business. And he said, I'll moderate it, and you'll be in a room with 8 to 10 other guys, and we come every month, and it's half a day on the first Monday of the month or whatever it was. And I said, I don't have time, man, because I'm running this, I was 2 years into it. I'm coming up on an $8 million run rate. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm refereeing basketball games at night to pay the bills. And he said, well, you got to do it. And I think it was like $650 a month. I was like, I can't afford that. And he said, you can't afford not to. And I said, well, I'm working all day, and then I go referee games 4 or 5 nights a week, and on the weekends to pay my bills while I'm trying to build my company, I don't have time for one half of a day a month. And he said, you can't afford not to. And it was some of the best advice that I ever got. So I joined that group, sat there for 2.5 years and pretty much said nothing, while all the guys that were in their 40s and 50s, I was learning about how business worked. And then my time came as I started to get more successful and started to make money. And I'm sitting here in front of you because of that group. Jump forward 12 years or so, and so I'm getting together with this group every month, right? And they're like my board of directors. And so jump forward, and I get approached to buy a company. They were doing about $4 million a year in revenue. And I couldn't quite get my hands around the business. And I took the business to the group, the financials, and said, here's what I'm thinking. And ultimately they said no. And I was like, hold on. Let me go find some answers to some questions. Let me come back. The next month I come back, I give it to them. No, Jerry, it's not a good fit. We can't get our hands around it. We can't understand it. And here's the thing, Joe. I was running 4 or 5 companies at the time. I had gas stations, car washes, convenience stores, transportation, woodworking, investment, real estate, huge real estate portfolio. I mean, I was hitting on all cylinders. I was doing $25 million a year in revenue. I'm making $250,000 a month in profit. And I'm like, you don't understand, guys. All you smart guys that I've listened to all of this time that have done nothing but provide me great advice, you don't know what you're talking about. I can't understand these numbers either. I can't get my hand around it, but I'm so successful. I'm doing so well that I'll figure it out on the other side. Literally is what I told myself. And so in my own head, I thought that was something that I could do. That was 2012. That cost me $6 million over the next 6 years and 6 years of my life to extricate myself from that problem. In doing that, upon audit over the next 3 to 4 years, as I had to battle through this rather large acquisition that I was trying to bring into my business, it turns out that the $250,000 I was making should have been about $310,000 a month. But I was busy looking over here while my core business right here in front of me that was doing so well was not hitting on all of this. It was hitting on cylinders, but there were cylinders left to hit that I wasn't able to benefit from. And I ended up costing myself, again, call it $10 million round number, a $10 million mistake when I was given the advice not to do it. But like a lot of successful entrepreneurs who struggle in the early days and will scratch and crawl for every dollar you can get, every ounce of profit you can find in something. Once you get to a size, once you become successful, this happens all of the time. And so that is the unfortunate story that was probably my most expensive mistake that I ever made. I would say that the company never really fully recovered from it, to be honest, because it was so detrimental. And I had the advice from other people telling me, Jerry, don't do it. You can't understand it. But my ego and how successful I had become and the things that I had done got in the way of clear thinking. And unfortunately, it cost me.
Staying in that story, what was the first thing that went wrong? A person in the group had already told you it was going to go wrong, but when did you first started realizing, okay, they were right?
It was almost immediately. It was the bite was too big for the company. That company at the time was doing about $12 million a year, transportation company. And so I was adding, essentially another $4 million in revenue. And of the $4 million, I knew that about $1.5 million of it was no good. In fact, I didn't even pay for that $1.5 million because I knew that had to get dumped out. That took way too long. The interaction between that company and my company, my employees that had been together at that point for 15 years, 20 years, just was not a good fit. And I couldn't do anything to make it a good fit. And the management of that company, there was a reason that they had to sell and that they were coming to me, and it just wasn't a good fit. So it was an instant clash at almost every level, that company to my company, which was, I don't know, you could see it if you were looking at it. The first set of eyes that said, or the first inclination that the financials were no good. And so rather than look at any of that, I just saw numbers and thought, I'm going to be able to extract 25 points off of this. And it was exactly the opposite. So it was pretty quick that all of those things working together, their crew versus my crew, the integration, the financials, obviously getting rid of the customers quicker, proved much more complicated than what I thought. I mean, I thought first day I just lop them out, and they were there months later. So it started pretty much right away.
Were they seeing things in you during this stretch that you weren't paying attention to? Do you think that when you made this decision against their better judgment, that was going on that you weren't picking up on?
Not necessarily. Theirs was purely financial, and the fact that we couldn't figure out exactly how they were making money or if they were making money. There was just a lot of very superficial, let's call it, 10,000 square foot question or 10,000 foot questions that needed to be answered that I just said, I'm not going to answer them. I'm just going to go, I'll figure it out, and I'll go right to the bottom. Beyond that, once we got to the ground level working on it post acquisition, they would help me with this or that as those things were happening. But it was really obvious looking back on it that the financials were in such a disarray. You had to assume the rest of the company was in disarray. I thought I could fix that naively.
And because you were doing so well in all the other companies at the time,
Correct.
So you kind of felt that momentum was going to be able to fix this later.
I was high on my own supply, as they say.
Can we go back to a specific situation, maybe when you knew early something was off with the hire? What you actually saw? What did you tell yourself about this as it was happening?
Yeah, the hiring is an interesting one, in particular in the way that you asked me that question. Hiring has been very, very difficult for the last 15 years, since 2008, 2010. It's just been with the amount of cash in the market, unemployment's been super low, and finding people to work for us, this is across all industries and in my groups, hiring's just been a stretch. So, I mean, there were times I couldn't ever find drivers. I went 3-4 years prior to COVID, just almost impossible to find people. Uber came in my industry, I was in transportation, and wiped out a whole bunch of drivers, right? And took them to that business as opposed to my business. So now we're competing with this new business. I didn't compete with the model in terms of I wasn't delivering people around. So Uber was not a competitor of mine. They were just a competitor of mine for drivers. And so in that context, all hiring became very difficult to do. And so you become desperate. And so you look to fill that spot. Just get it in there, make it work, and we'll see what happens. You can make the argument that we didn't have a choice. If they worked for a month, that's better than not having them at all. I don't think that was true because many times, I'll give you an example. I had a rather large medical customer, and I mean large, 7-figure a year customer that left me in the mid-teens because one of those drivers, it was making a medical delivery, and in front of an old woman who was sitting in her picture window in the front of her house, stopped in her rose bushes holding her pharmaceutical and peed in her bushes. And so, of course, it comes immediately, and subsequently that driver got fired, and of course that driver got unemployment in Oregon because he can't hold his bladder, so it's not his fault, of course, that he's peeing in the old woman's rose bushes in front of her house with her sitting in her window holding her medication. But the customer dropped me, and they didn't drop me right away, but it was a couple of years. They let me go. I never went to another meeting without them mentioning that happening. It didn't matter if the people that were managing it at the time or later knew about it and said, oh, you guys are the company that had the guy pee in the bushes, and ultimately trying to get back into the company after getting fired, and even with a good pricing structure and operations and the right company for the work, I couldn't ever get back in because we were always the company that this employee peed in the rose bushes. Well, it turned out that employee had a list of other things that they had done in a very short amount of time, but we needed the delivery done. So there's, I guess, the most stark example I can give you where you held on to them quicker, longer than you should have. I recognized it after the fact. It's like, how in the hell did we miss that? And realistically, as a management group, we said, no, we kind of saw it, but it's so much work coming in and so many operating things going on, and somebody's got to communicate with them, and we weren't watching exactly what he was doing, but the writing was on the wall, but in the fog of war, we ignored it.
When you look at the pattern of hiring and that acquisition you made, Would you say it's the same pattern or something different? Is it the financial that you were chasing on both because you had to put the people into the position to keep the ball rolling, just like you wanted to buy this company because you were doing so well at the time? Or is it something completely different?
Yeah, it's different because the acquisition I knew, I mean, they told me we didn't have answers, right? We can't tell. So maybe it'll be great, maybe it won't. But the downside is going to be very expensive. But I had it in my head that I can do it. So the signals were very clear there. It wasn't, it's going to cost you $10 million in 6 years of your life. Certainly it wasn't that. But it was clear that this is something we need to think long and hard about and not jump into it. And ultimately, you should not have done it. That was pretty clear. The employees, you're fighting again in that fog of war. So you're trying to bring bodies in and everybody's running on the ragged edge, and you take whatever you can get. You start to whore yourself out because you need these bodies doing these jobs, and maybe you start cutting corners, but it looks okay and it works for a while, right? I mean, and it does, and things go along really good, but there's a hiccup, and then you don't really look at the hiccup because you got 27 other hiccups over here, and then pretty soon you're like, oh, the breadcrumbs were there. We just didn't pay attention to them. We didn't see them in the long term.
Well, and for your core people, a lot of had been with you through years. Were those people around you seeing things that in yourself, in you, as you're making these hires? Are they saying like, okay, what, like we can see that this, like almost like the financials with your friends in the peer group? Were people in your company seeing as you're bringing these people on that, oh, they're probably not the best fits, but they're seeing that and you're not?
I'm sure that happened. More specifically, I think that the team's all fighting the same way, and you need a block, right? You got to put a square in there, and you got to fill it in, and you got to put that body there. And so they're saying, I don't know about this guy, but it's like, okay, if we get a month out of him, it's better than nothing, or that sort of thing. Or let's see, maybe he'll surprise us. That's a kiss of death. Let's see, maybe he'll surprise us. So I think we were all kind of playing the same game. I'm going to generalize. For sure there were mistakes I made there that they probably would not have. But I'll generalize and say that we're all kind of working on the same. Let's get that in there and see if we can't make this work. What's the worst thing that can happen? And I'm talking, again, I've had 10,000 employees. So, it's a small percentage that we're talking about in this context.
You said speed can feel like progress even when it is not. When did you understand that about yourself? Not as an idea specifically, but something you'd watched yourself do.
I think that speed, the killer of business, I would rather jump in and make mistakes without all of the information and have an opportunity to succeed off of it, which is the majority of my business life, versus thinking something, planning on it to the umpteenth degree, and ultimately maybe never pulling pulling the string and making it happen because I'm overthinking it. And overthinking is a death knell. So there's this idea that we are taught that every duck has to be in a row, everything has to be lined up. You have to have your 6 months of backup money, and you have to have, all of your bills paid through this period, and all of these other debt is bad, and there's all of these rules and all of these things that I don't have any idea as it relates to entrepreneurship and the hundreds of entrepreneurs I know. It has no bearing on what those guys do and how they do it. Their world is very different. And so, this go fast and break things is probably the better advice than go slow and never do anything. And it's really easy to slow down and not do anything. It's really safe. It's more comfortable. But, again, as a kid from the streets and who's gone, I've done very well for myself. I've made fortunes and I've lost them, as I've said. A lot of the value that I bring to companies today is the fortunes I've lost, as much as I hate to admit that. But I wouldn't have had any of that if I went slow. I had a competitor go out of business in 2004 overnight, a transportation competitor. And my team and I worked 8 straight days on a 45-minute nap on the third day. We hired 55 employees in 1 month, and we were only about 75, 100 employees at the time. And we brought on about $4 million in business. I was doing work for customers I didn't even know, I had never met. I've sent people to the far corners of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho to go get their stuff, assuming that I could sell them and bring that business on, which ultimately I did. But had I blinked, someone else would have done it. Had I stopped to think about this might not work, I might not get paid, I was like, no, man, I'm a risk taker. Time to roll those bones and see what happens and see if I can't make it happen. So I guess in a way you could jump forward a decade later and kind of understand, I'll jump into this business, this acquisition. It's not in 3 different states to the far corners of the earth. It's right here in front of me. I'll try to figure out, and I'll ultimately be able to make it happen. At the time in 2004, I didn't have people telling me this is what I should go do. I just went and did it because the risk or because the reward was worth it. I don't even know if I even considered the risk, to be honest with you. It was just go full speed. So had I hesitated, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't have done the things that I did. It was this cornerstone foundation of my business that I built in 2004 doing that. And so I think that running forward and breaking things is better than hanging back and trying to figure out how to get around them if I had a choice. But in some things, moderation, I suppose.
And to that, is there maybe a version of that same thing? I'll call it momentum over clarity that still shows up in how you run things now?
Yeah, without a doubt. I would say I'm a lot closer to the 2004 guy. Still, but I'm probably a lot more careful because of the 2012. But to the normal person, let's say to the average, even an average entrepreneur, I'm still way more aggressive. I mean, I just always think I'm going to come out on top, and I've been crushed. And I always think I'm going to come out on top. So even when you get crushed, it's not naivete. It's not saying, if not for this, I would have done that. It's like, no, right there. That's the mistake I made. I see it. Yep. I should have done this and I did that. And man, now I'm feeling it. Now I'm taking the brunt of it. And you lick your wounds for a while. You don't just get up and, just start battling again. It can be tiring and it can take it out of you. But I think it's a little bit easier when you're honest with yourself about what you've done wrong, what mistakes were made, what instructions you gave. I always said when I was a kid, when I was 14, I got beat up, taking money out of the bank. They robbed me, mugged me up pretty good, took my $80, broke my nose, broke 2 ribs, rolled me underneath of a bus stop and left me for dead in August. I wake up a couple hours later and I get out from underneath there. I got blood down my front. Both eyes are black. And I get on a bus and I have to take 2 transfers and then I have to walk home 2 miles. This is in Portland, Oregon. And as I'm walking home, I go to the square all the time. There's an oversized square right before the interstate freeway in Portland, Oregon, Northeast, an oversized sidewalk square. I don't know why it's there. I don't know why they do that. It's still oversized to this day. Now, I'm beat, half to death, and I'm crawling my way home, very different time back in the day, blood all down my front. And a voice says to me as I'm walking in front of some duplexes, I thought somebody was yelling at me, Joe, from the duplex. The voice says to me, from over here, back behind my head, a female voice says, everything's your fault. Now, I look at the duplex because I think someone's yelling at me through a window in the duplex, but there's not. And I look around. And the voice says it again, female voice, clear as day behind my head. Now, appreciate I'm not in the right mindset, obviously, after what happened to me. But it said, everything is your fault. If you don't take responsibility for everything that happens to you, you're going to be right where you are 30 years from now. When you get older, you're going to be right where you are. And I looked, and I'm arguing with it. It's not my fault. I didn't do anything. I got mugged taking money out of the bank. I'd like to tell you that it was a hockey stick change and, automatically I did this. I didn't. But that advice stuck. I don't know if it's Jimmy Cricket. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was God, Buddha, Confucius. I don't know. My conscience, I don't know where it was. My delirious state obviously played a part in it. I have a little nubbin on my nose right now. I went home for 3 days and held my nose shut until it quit opening up here because they broke it up on the top. And my ribs still bother me to this day. So I never forget the lesson that I learned, that everything is my fault. Everything is your responsibility. When you come from abject poverty like I did, everybody blames everybody else for all of their problems. And I never did that. And that really came to a head when my son was born at 28 years old. And then I started my first business where everything is my fault. So all of those all of these mistakes that were made, I've had people lose $100,000 on my part. right? Move a decimal point over. I've had people steal from me tens of thousands of dollars in family members in accounting. I don't get pissed. I don't get mad. I try to figure out what did I do wrong because that's my fault. That is the song from poverty. And so to break out of that for me, that little voice beaten down the way that I was said to me, everything is your fault. Change it or you're going to be doing exactly what you were doing, just like everybody else is 30 years from now. I don't know where that came from other than it changed my life. Again, not on a hockey stick. I had my tough times. But by the time it was all ready, it kind of all coalesced together. And so my ability to manage through these situations, these ups and downs, highs and lows, I don't get too high and I don't get too low. I stay right there in the middle because that's where good decision making is, because there is no emotion in business.
That is a great place to ask you, for people listening who want to follow your work, what would be the best place to find you?
So go to the Kronos Group. They can look my name up, Jerry Brazie, anywhere they'll find me. But go to the Kronos Group, Kronos, kronosgroup.org. And what the Kronos, or you can go to my school page. So I have a school page, a school community. It's called the School Forge. So go to the Kronos Group Forge page at school, or the kronosgroup.org. School is SKOOL, and that's my community. We're just starting all of this, so I'm having a great time doing it. And you can find everything there is to know about me, and you can reach out to me there. And here's the thing that I want to tell everybody, Joe. I love conversations about business. So if you're thinking about business, I love conversations about life. If anything I've told you has inspired you, or you're interested in, or you see some similarities in your lives, I love those conversations. So anybody can go to kronosgroup.org, and you can get a 15-minute meeting with me. It doesn't cost you nothing other than your time. Go check me out on the School Forge page, and also go to the kronosgroup.org, and I'll talk to you about anything that you want to talk about, because I love this game of life, this game of business. And I've got, like I said, in my mistakes, I think, is where the vast majority of my value comes from, because from those mistakes have come many of my wins.
I'll put all those links in the show notes so people can find you. And great to meet you, and thanks again for your time today.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
He had the advice. He had the room. He had people who'd been right before telling him not to move. He moved anyway and knew within weeks they were right. He didn't miss it. He moved past it.